Podcasting, the latest frontier. These are the episodes of a Catch as Catch Can podcast. Its continuing mission: to explore strange, nerdy topics, to chat about sports, movies, sci-fi, and so much more. To boldly pod where this nerd has gone before. Captain's Log, pod date 0907.19. On this episode of Too Boldly Pod, we're going to continue our discussion of the Doctors of Doctor Who. I finished watching the 9th Doctor episodes, and we're going to have a little discussion about the rebirth of Doctor Who in 2005 and the 9th Doctor's tenure. We're also going to discuss the phenomenon in the mid-1970s that sort of become a mystery, and that is the band Klaatu. If you haven't heard of them, stick around. I think you'll enjoy the story. We also have this week's To Boldly Pod question all about the seasons, and we have a little bit of fun with what's in the news. So, Scotty, set phasers on stun, engage.
Every cell in my body's dying.
Can't you do something?
Yeah, I'm doing it now. Time Lords have this little trick. It's sort of a way of cheating death. Except it means I'm going to change. And I'm not going to see you again. Not like this. Not with this daft old face. And before I go...
Don't say that.
Rose. Before I go, I just want to tell you, you were fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And you know what? So was I.
And that, of course, is the 9th Doctor's regeneration. And as I was preparing that for our discussion of the 9th Doctor, it kind of led me to a thought for a topic next time on this podcast about or pertaining to Doctor Who that I think will be fun, that maybe I'll get some interaction with some people about. And that is actually the whole concept of regeneration. But we'll discuss that on a later podcast. Today we're talking about the 9th Doctor. As you all know, I've been rewatching the series from Doctor to Doctor, and I concluded my viewing of the 9th Doctor. And for those that may not know, the 9th Doctor was the first Doctor in the show's revival in 2005, and it was portrayed by Christopher Eccleston. And you may be wondering, if you listen to this podcast all the time, well, you went from 7 to 9. What happened to 8? I am not the biggest fan of the TV movie Doctor Who, so maybe we will come back and discuss that in and of itself. Not that I don't count it as an actual Doctor in Doctor Who. It's just, it is what it is, and I'll probably need its own podcast for that. But for now, we're talking about the 9th Doctor vis-a-vis the rebirth of Doctor Who in 2005, and it was brought back to the BBC by Russell Davies and his production team. And as I stated, Christopher Eccleston was cast as the Ninth Doctor in the role. Now, one thing that both Eccleston and Davies had stated when they restarted the show, they wanted a less eccentric Doctor or person or portrayal of the Doctor in this role. And you really kind of got it with Christopher Eccleston. You got quite a range of emotion in this series in 2005. And for you American listeners, they called them series, not seasons, in Britain. So if I say series, I mean each season, but I digress. But they wanted a less eccentric portrayal of the Doctor. So what you got, and it was something at the time, I remember my first viewing of it, I wasn't really sold on it, but in subsequent watchings, especially this time, I was really enamored with the range that he showed. He showed goofy, funny, endearing, angry, and sort of a full gamut of emotions with his portrayal of the Doctor. Now, the stories that they portrayed in that first series, again, upon first watching, I loved them, liked them a lot, but I wasn't really, I was still the old school Doctor Who. And again, with subsequent viewings and watching of them, they really do a great job. And one thing about Russell Davies' shows, and that goes not only the Doctor Who, but also to Torchwood and other things that he's done, is he really draws out your emotional connection to the characters in the program. Now, alongside the Doctor was one centralized companion, and that is given to you right off the get-go with the premiere episode titled Rose. So you get Rose Tyler as the Doctor's companion, and I'll get into some subsequent minor companions as we go along on this chat. But I will say she was a great fit for what they were trying to achieve in this first series, because you got the Doctor who is still the Doctor, traveling anywhere and everywhere, and you had her, Rose, as the wide-eyed, unknowing, I almost said uneducated, but she wasn't uneducated about the universe and going to all these places for the very first time. You really got to see the uniqueness of experiencing all of these things through her eyes, and the humanity, if you will, through her eyes, through all of these places they traveled. And I'm not going to go episode to episode. I'll just sum up the season as saying they did a fantastic job in this season of making it sort of a long arced storyline. You didn't necessarily have to watch each episode to follow along with the storyline, but they kept dropping the bad wolf hints in a lot of the episodes, and the Doctor and Rose would make mention of it. So as it all tied together in the series finale, the last episode, it really tied everything together for the entire series, and that was something they continued to do with the newer Doctor Who episodes. Sort of, I don't know if it was really in homage to the old story formats or not, or just something that they think is successful, and I think it actually works. So they did a good job of introducing a lot of newness, new creatures, new aliens, new things to the Doctor Who universe, but they also did a nice job of reincorporating some standards, some old classics into the rebirth of the series with the Daleks and the Cybermen and whatnot. Now, as far as sub-companions go with this series, they did a couple of them. And I don't know if Mickey, being Rose's earthbound boyfriend at the beginning of the series, was ever thought to, or maybe wanting to be, a companion, but he wasn't. But they included Adam into a couple of episodes, which I never really did read up or hear anything, whether that was an attempt to have him become a companion and it just didn't work out because of the actors or what. But he was in an episode called Dalek, and then he ended up taking off with the Doctor and Rose and appearing in another one. Now, they kind of, let's just say the Doctor reared his ugly head and kicked him out of the TARDIS after that first trip. So I'm not sure. I guess I'd have to read up or do a little digging and investigating to see whether they wanted Adam to become a companion or not. But it is what it is. And then later on, in a 2-part story, actually the first one written by future showrunner Stephen Moffat, we were introduced to Captain Jack Harkness, who people that enjoy Doctor Who know who the character is. And if you watched the spin-off series Torchwood, you definitely know who Captain Jack is. And he was introduced into the series in the last couple of episodes and went on to appear in a few with the 10th Doctor as well. Now, Captain Jack is a character, if you're unaware, that has really endeared himself to the fans of Doctor Who, the Whovians. People just love John Barrowman, who portrayed Captain Jack, and he in turn has really embraced the universe of Doctor Who. So he was a fun character to be included into the whole Doctor Who universe. And although they never come out and quite say it, they kind of hint to the fact in dialogue in the 10th Doctor that one of the new aliens that we meet here in this rebirth of the Doctor in the first series with the 9th Doctor is the face of Bo. And later on in the 10th Doctor, Captain Jack makes reference to he used to be called the face of Bo. And as we get into the 10th Doctor, he's more prevalent with him. So we'll talk more about Captain Jack as we discuss the 10th Doctor. But just keep that in mind, and maybe we will come back and delve into Captain Jack even farther. Now, before I get into my summary, my final thoughts, sound like Jerry Springer, of the 9th Doctor and the first series, I did ask people on social media if they had any thoughts they'd like to share about it, and I did get a couple, so I'm going to share them now. Now, my friend Karen just simply said, I loved the Eccleston's episodes. He was my very first Doctor, and I loved them. My friend Kate, I'm just going to read verbatim what she stated, and you'll understand what she's trying to convey. As you know, I love Eccleston, the 9th Doctor, and he was also my first Doctor. I've never gone back to watch them again, so I do wonder how they hold up in retrospect. I will say that I think Eccleston made it hard for me to transition to Tennant, which, as you know, I was unable to do. The difference between the two actors and their portrayals was so stark. These are my thoughts on the matter. Well, thank you, Kate. And they are very stark, but I think that's sort of what they're going for with each and every Doctor. They don't want a carbon copy of the previous one. They want to let the show grow and evolve and take different directions. So thank you to Karen and to Kate for your thoughts. My thoughts are this. Now, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have always put Tennant, the next Doctor, the 10th Doctor, ahead of Eccleston. And I might still do that after I finish this entire rewatch. But The Ninth Doctor and the Rebirth, as time has gone on, has really grown on me. And I think the emotion and the pathos that they convey, the drama that they convey into great science fiction storytelling, and that could possibly be because of the actors or Russell Davies or the writers or a mix of all of them, really exemplifies and magnifies and shows you why a show like Doctor Who is so popular and continues going on 60 years now to be a favorite of people like me and others that enjoy the show so much. So I think it was a wonderful, fantastic rebirth to a series that we all loved so much. So all in all, I loved the one series. Do I wish I would have had more series with Eccleston as the Doctor? Yeah, I probably do, but I think the way they changed it and repackaged it and delivered it to all of us here in the 21st century was perfect. And he did a fantastic job setting the table for every subsequent Doctor to come. Now, if you have any thoughts on the Ninth Doctor or the rebirth of Doctor Who from 2005, let me know on Facebook or Twitter, and we will come back, as we always do, and talk more Doctor Who farther down the road. Now, with this past week being Labor Day here in the United States, and that, of course, signifies the unofficial end of summer and the debut, the birth, the dawning of fall, I decided that, or actually I didn't really decide, I just decided to throw this out there and see what kind of responses I get, but a fun little Too Boldly Pod question, and it's simple. It's rank the seasons from your favorite to least favorite, and I got a ton of fun replies from each and every one of you. So, here we go. My friend Narek replied, winter, fall, summer, spring. Kelly replied, winter, fall, summer, spring. Frequent contributor to this podcast, Dave, replied, his favorite to least favorite seasons: garlic salt, salt, pepper, lemon pepper, and paprika. I need to get a rim shot. Anyways, Michael replied the autumnal equinox, the vernal equinox, the winter solstice, and the summer solstice. Jay replied summer, spring, fall, winter. Deb replied fall, spring, winter, summer. Kate replied winter, spring, fall, and summer. I basically love cold and hate heat. Fall here, California, is almost as hot as summer. Noted author Paul Canellis replied fall, spring, summer, winter. Mark replied fall, spring, summer, winter. Kayla replied fall, summer, spring, winter. Jim replied Deep Space Nine season 7, then season 6, then season 4, then season 5. I guess he likes Deep Space Nine. Larry replied football and hockey season. So apparently that means fall is his favorite. Noreen replied summer, fall, spring, and winter. Tammy replied summer, spring, fall, winter. Sherry replied summer, fall, spring, winter. And Kelly replied summer, different Kelly, summer, fall, spring, and winter. And that kind of shows you the dichotomy that we are as a society. We all love different things. And what did we learn from all of that? If we can all love things differently, we can always come to a common ground. Okay, I'm going to get off my political porch now. thank you all for answering that fun little Too Boldly Pod question. If you want to let me know how you rank the 4 seasons, not the band, the actual seasons, let me know on Facebook or Twitter at Too Boldly Pod. Well, since I also run an online radio station, I suppose on occasion I should come on here and talk about something of the musical nature. Maybe, maybe not. Anyways, last week, my buddy Rob actually sent me an article of something, and I'm not saying I'm the know-all of music, far from it. There's probably a lot more about music I don't know than I do, but I know a fair amount about music, especially classic rock and, say, 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s music. But my buddy Rob sent me this article that I really had never heard of, and I was surprised. So I did some digging and actually went out and bought this album. And you know what? I can see where all this hype came from. And before I get into the story, I just want to say something like this would never happen in today's music scene or in any media outlet, whether it be acting or music or an author or anything, because it's just, there's no way you can possibly happen because of all the eyes and all the ears and all the media outlets. And let's just face it, people want their face and their name out there. But this is a very cool story, and I hope everybody out there enjoys it. And if you get, I can't technically play any of the music on this podcast without getting in trouble with royalties and whatnot. So if you're interested, look the band up. You can hear some of their songs on YouTube. And then if you like them, go out and buy it. But have you ever heard of the band Klaatu? No? Well, I didn't either. They're a Canadian trio of musicians that happened to meet in 1973 and decided to start a progressive rock band. They named themselves Klaatu, of course, after the 1950 sci-fi movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. And they wanted to sound sort of a blend of progressive rock, pop, and art rock. And their formation was a little bit after the Beatles broke up, so keep that in mind. So what they did is they got signed to a record deal by Capitol Records, and they released their first album in 1976. And they didn't have a ton of big hits, but they did have a platinum-selling album, their album 3:47 Eastern Standard Time. And there's a reason that it went platinum, and here's where it kind of gets funky. I mentioned earlier it was shortly after the Beatles had broke up. When they recorded the album and released the album, they didn't do any live shows. They didn't put their names on the album. The only thing they put on there was all songs written by Klaatu. They didn't say where they were from. They didn't say, they were as anonymous as they possibly could be. And they stated at the time that they did this because they wanted the music to speak for itself instead of being focused on them. But as things go with mysteries, especially back before media was everywhere, this sort of legacy or suspicion arose around some of their songs, specifically a song California Jam, which was their quote-unquote big single, and actually a couple of the other songs on the album, but I'm not going to break down every single song. But they sounded very, very late, we'll say mid to late Beatle-esque. And one of the singers, the singer in the band, sounded quite a bit like Paul McCartney, or a little bit like Paul McCartney, and their sound was very Beatle-esque. So this sort of phenomenon took off where people were saying the Beatles had got back together and called themselves Klaatu and made this album. And there's a couple of reasons in the conspiracy thing that makes people believe that, or made people believe that it was the Beatles. The Beatles and Klaatu had the same number of vowels and consonants. Ringo Starr's 1974 album Goodnight Vienna was a cover of a recreation of the scene from The Day the Earth Stood Still, the same movie that Klaatu was taken from. The Klaatu record had come from Capitol Records, which was the same record company that the Beatles were signed to in the United States. As I stated, some of the vocals sounded suspiciously like Paul McCartney, and Capitol Records didn't confirm or deny who the band was because they actually had no idea who Klaatu was, because they got the deal through their manager. So this whole phenomenon went on that people really thought that this was the Beatles, so the album started to sell by everybody. And like I said, when Rob sent me this article, I had never heard of this before. So I went to Amazon and I bought the album, and some of it really does sound like the Beatles. Now, after the fact, the three guys came out and said, no, we're not the Beatles. We're just three Canadian musicians who thought we'd run with this. But at the breaking point, I suppose, they came clean. But if you haven't heard of Klaatu and you're interested in kind of cool little stories like that, go check them out on YouTube and see if maybe I'm just not buying into the propaganda. But I really do think they sound a little bit like the Beatles, and it's a pretty cool little story in music. If you have any thoughts or you've heard of Klaatu, let me know on Facebook or Twitter at TooBoldlyPod. And in the news, and you may have heard this story already, but it still cracks me up. So, it's from the article's actually from the New York Post, and the headline is "Thousands to Attend Barbecue Outside of Home of Vegan Who Sued Neighbors Over Smelly Meats." Thousands of people are roasting an Australian vegan who took her neighbors to court over the smell of meat and fish from their barbecue by planning a massive cookout outside of her home. She made headlines this week for her legal beef, in which she claimed the odors from her neighbor's barbecue had destroyed her quality of life. Now, more than 3,000 people are planning to attend a cookout outside of her Perth home, organized on a Facebook page called Community Barbecue for Celia Carden. Don't let Celia destroy a good old Aussie tradition. Join us for a community barbecue and help Celia Carden get some pork on her fork, is what the event page description reads. The barbecue is scheduled for October 19th, and vegans are not welcome, the page says. Now, Carden's legal battles with her neighbors began last year. Her complaints were tossed out of the court, shockingly, earlier this year, and she filed an appeal. The appeal was also rejected in July, but she has vowed to keep fighting. Now, okay, I understand if you foul smells and everything, and I understand if you're a vegan, and I have no problem if you're a vegan. If eating meat is not your thing, that's fine, but barbecue smells fantastic. But I'm a meat eater, so really all I can say to this is, the hell is wrong with mankind? And that's going to wrap up this episode of Too Boldly Pod. I hope you enjoyed the program. If you have any thoughts about anything we discussed, let me know on Facebook or Twitter at Too Boldly Pod, especially if you are interested in the Klaatu story. Listen to him on Facebook, or on YouTube, and let me know what you think, if they really do sound like the Beatles to you too. Coming up in future podcasts, we're still working on our October To Boodly Pod Halloween special, Ghost Special program. And next week we're going to dive deep. Well, maybe not too deep, but we're going to talk a little bit of fantasy football. As usual, I don't have a closer for this show, so I'll simply say, well, to borrow a line from the day the earth stood still, since we talked about Klaatu, I close with Klaatu, Parada, Nikto. Talk to everybody next time.
WLLP, Spock Rock Radio.